All right.
Bang.
He did that yesterday and it screwed things up, as I recall.
That's why I didn't do the clap. I'm still out here, Pete, at the LD Micro Conference. There's about 300 companies presenting here. I mean, it's crazy. It's a whole bunch of companies that are just barely public, some that are very seriously public, and some that are private and wanting to go public. So, wow, there are a lot of people, and but a lot of good business.
How many masks have you seen out there? I know you're in LA. That's why I ask.
Yeah, it is always surprising when you walk around and you see people with masks, and it's not just the old people, Pete. I mean, just like New York, there's so many people here that are just they were scarred by the COVID thing, and that they just can't help themselves. Yeah. I'll have to, maybe tomorrow I'll show you what I saw at the mall yesterday, Pete, because Dyson, the vacuum cleaner guys, they're kind of famous for that. But then they made fans, and then they made all this other stuff. They've got a thing that you look like Bane from Batman. It fits over your nose and mouth, and it goes around your head, around your ears, all the way over like this. So basically you see this much of your face, but this thing is covering your mouth, and it's an air purifier, a portable air purifier.
Let me tell you something. That sounds like you were describing the Apple conference.
Does it?
The latest, greatest from them, because that was not well received, John.
Well, the damn thing's $3,900 or something, isn't it, Pete?
Like $3,500. It's as big as like you were just describing. I mean, it's not going to be even out for, what did they say, almost a year, Jared? You're a tech guy. You probably know. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and also we all already have huge TVs. I mean, it looks like it's a device to make a fake huge TV in your house, but you still are stuck to your chair unless you get the dorky battery to put on it.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah. And by the way, I just got I think I got an 85-inch TV, Pete, in Puerto Rico, of all places, right? Just wandered into the Best Buy, said, yeah, I'll take that one.
Why so big?
Because I'll tell you why. Because it was $999. $999. Or I could go buy a $3,900 headset that I have to sit there by myself because, the nice thing about the TV is if you got 6 people in the room, they can all watch too. With that VR headset, not so much.
God, I miss those big, huge boxes that looked like a refrigerator for a TV.
Oh, yeah. I don't miss those. Hey, folks, you are listening to The Rebel's Edge with Pete Najarian, John Najarian. Jared is doing all the magic, which includes sometimes if the Bears are winning, then he has the Bears snowboarding and so forth across the screen. And if the Bulls are winning, well, we'll have to see. But we are about to dive into the show. We appreciate all of you joining us. We've been talking some new distribution deals out here while we're here too, Pete.
Awesome.
And we might have some really big news very, very soon. But let's start off with the Macro Minute. So Macro Minute today is really all about the market can't decide. The market tried to go up, bumped to the downside, then broke kind of hard in S&P terms, Pete, because we were up 5 and now we're down 14 points. That's maybe not world-breaking news, but it's still Macro Minute.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, John, where we saw a big move really was when Canada decided they wanted to continue this quantitative tightening. And with that, we immediately saw the 10-year make a nice spike up about 2.5%, a nice move to the upside. It's not into any kind of scary territory or anything like that, but it was a pretty violent move. And then the markets, of course, sort of moved off of that. But so I put this all on the Canadians today.
Damn Canucks. We love you. We love you, especially all of you in Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, which is pretty much the 3 cities that are Canada. Sorry, Calgary. All right. Let's dive into, Peter.
Fantastic Futures.
makes it louder all the time too, Pete.
I think he does.
Fantastic futures. All right. So I was talking to our friends at the CME this morning briefly, Pete, and they thought it was too loud too. Just like Huey Lewis in Back to the Future. Son, you're just too damn loud. To Michael J. Fox, of course. But anyway, fantastic futures. Wheat futures down about 3.5% today. They're down 9% year to date. I bet you can't find me one thing, folks, from wheat thins to whatever else that is down, even though the major input of their products is down 9%.
And we were talking about that yesterday with coffee, John, and Starbucks and some of their pricing, but we won't hit them a second day, although I already did. This is day 3 for me where I'm going to go crude and nat gas. And here's why, John. Crude back up over 73. You've got nat gas on a nice sprint of late up to 232. June 1st, not that long ago, it was 2.13. So we've had a nice little move there out of both of those to the upside. We'll see if that's sustainable. We've been talking about OPEC. Did OPEC actually make some moves that are going to stick this time or not? So far not, but we are seeing a nice elevation, and that is a hugely liquidity product over at the CME. How about that, Terry?
Bang. All right. Let's talk, Pete, about a firm, because this one, it's one of those buy now, pay later firms. And smart people like we'll be up in Napa tomorrow, Pete, with Bryn Talkington for that special live trading event that we do. And Bryn is one of the people that accurately said, hey, anybody can do this. It's really not as proprietary as some of you may think, but it's making a nice move today. And the nice move is based on Amazon announcing that eligible merchants, because not everything that sells on Amazon is an Amazon product. There's a lot of merchants, a lot of products that people basically drop ship it to Amazon and then have Amazon fulfill it for them. So they're a big consolidator, if you will, Pete. But anyway, those merchants will now be able to use Affirm. And some of those big merchants are people like Casper, the mattress company, USA Berkeley Filters, Ultra Sabers, a bunch of these kinds of firms. This is a pretty big deal.
I think it's a huge deal, John, because this is a company that's been kind of spiraling to the downside to some degree. I mean, the 52-week range is 8 to 41, and until today, it was down there a lot closer to 8. As a matter of fact, today it's trading a little over $17, call it 12, 14% to the upside. There's a huge short here, John. So when you do get good news, when you do have something like this out there, those shorts start feeling the squeeze once again. We talk about this all the time on these moves. 15 to 20% on the short side, that's going to cause a bit of a squeeze. But can they actually ever make money? And this is one of those companies that certainly does burn up a hell of a lot of money. They certainly do have a hell of a lot of debt. So hopefully this is something that can get them over that hump, John. I'm not convinced yet, but I think this is a huge boost to the company, no doubt. I mean, being a part of Amazon Pay, that's a big deal. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't bet against them because of this, because like you said, Pete, there are so many thousands of merchants on that site that could avail themselves of buy now, pay later with Affirm. That's a big deal. And I would certainly be right with you, as in that 21% short interest. That is a squeeze that ain't done yet. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about Tesla, Pete. One of the most popular stocks, of course, that anybody talks about is Tesla. All the Model 3s, all of Tesla's models now qualify for that government tax credit, because they don't pay you. They give you a credit against your taxes. But nonetheless, it takes it down to $33,000, Pete, for the Model 3, which means that you could have a Kia or you could have a Tesla. And there ain't a lot of competition if you've ever been in both of those vehicles. I would say that this is huge for Tesla. The fact that maybe Elon Musk is going to license autopilot to other driverless car companies. So for instance, anybody else that wants in the space, nobody's got more data than him. So they could say, we're going to build our own. Fine. Where's the data that you're basing it on? Oh, yeah, there's that. It's kind of a big deal.
And John, that's been the piece of the pie that nobody's ever really understood. All the guys on TV, all the guys on the radio, and they sit and talk about it as just the auto company. And it's not just an auto company. It's far more than that. And the data that they've been able to collect over all these years now has been absolutely incredible for them. So you're right. With the licensing deal, I think that is a big deal. I think also the supercharging thing we talked about yesterday with Ford getting involved with that, that's a big deal. By the way, 2 million option contracts trading in the first 3 hours of the day, John, 65% of those on the call side. Do you think people are pretty attracted to Tesla these days? And how about all those haters of Elon after the Twitter deal and Tesla and all the rest of it? I think Elon's walking out with his head held high right now and maybe his chest pumped up pretty good because a lot of those losers are not too happy about what's going on.
Pete, it's up $60 in a month. You look at the, 5-day chart on it and it's still, like this, lower left to upper right, like Gartman used to say. And I think that when you're Elon Musk and Tesla and you trade back above now, they finally broke the level, Pete. Now it pulled back. It hit over almost 31 today. That is 231 a share, but it pulled back to 224 or whatever. But I think this is one that you want to definitely, on a significant dip again, I buy back a bigger position, Pete. And Mark Lepresti and I were talking about that with some folks out here, because you get a little bit of a dip, maybe into the teens. I got to throw on another call spread in here. And by the way, we did have unusual activity, Pete, a couple times in Tesla. The most recent ones just expired, but nonetheless, the stock was 182. You can see it right there on your screen, 182 when we saw that activity. And by the way, it closed at 200 that week. So, gives you an idea. Now, like I said, today it was 231. So it's on a tear. I love it. And I think people are going to, take a lot of pain if they choose to follow Bill Gates on the short side.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Roku, Pete, because our buddy Farmer Jim used to always talk about this one. The stock was, just a world beater for a while. It traded to nearly $500. But at $60 a share, it was down about 34% this year. And that's a pretty scary thing for anybody who was brave enough to hold the stock. Part of this, Pete, is that they make their money on ads. And right now, there aren't as many ads as people had hoped, not because digital doesn't work, but because they're kind of holding their dry powder saying, I don't know how much the consumer's got right now. I might wait. And waiting is what hurts these guys. But today it's not hurting them. The stock is so cheap that people are piling into it.
Yeah, they are piling into it, John. I'll tell you what makes me nervous about this stock is the same thing it always has. They've got a big short interest. That doesn't bother me at all. And as a matter of fact, that's why you get moves like this when people start getting a little bit nervous about their shorts. They might start reaching themselves and suddenly you've got yourselves a little bit of a squeeze. It's not a huge short interest, but it's somewhere close to 10%. I will tell you this, though. Last year, they lost $500 million. They still don't know when they're going to be profitable. They think maybe in 2024. That's an issue for me still, John. And I know you're a little bit more bullish on this name than I am right now, because when I look at it and I look at a company that's been around a while now, it's not like some brand new company that all of a sudden, hey, we're going to IPO, here we go, and everything else. They've been around. We all know it. You and I have sat there when Farmer Jim was talking about this thing, and it was in the triple digits in a big way. It is nowhere near that anymore. And it's finally probably in a much more priceable range. But I would tell you, I want to see them actually show us that they can make money doing what they do. They haven't been able to do it yet. They've got software, they've got the hardware, they've got all the things that you would expect for them to be able to do something great. And it just hasn't quite happened yet. They've got the cash, so they got the balance sheet, but I still am concerned about the fact that they don't make money.
Yep. It's an issue. I agree, but they are one of the preferred platforms. So let's say that you do have a smart TV and you've got stuff built into that smart TV, stuff being things like Netflix, which was having a pretty good couple days, things like Amazon Prime and so forth. I understand those are built in, but if you want more than that, depending on who you got, whether it's Samsung, Pete, or LG or Vivio or whomever it might be, you kind of need a little more. And that little black box that Roku sells you has a lot of those channels, hundreds of channels in it. So yeah, I would say you don't have to chase it at 72, but I think this one has already taken the pain being down as much as it was on the year. Campbell Soup, Pete. I know, no soup for you. I don't know if Pete's much of a soup guy like the Seinfeld group.
I am not.
Have you ever seen the actual place that they put in New York, Pete? Because somebody bought the rights to that and put up, the soup Nazi place in New York. Because it didn't exist.
Right.
But apparently, Larry David, through his genius, along with Seinfeld, really made that guy a famous guy. Next thing you know, he's selling his image to this soup place in New York. But Campbell Soup, shares down 6%. Latest quarterly filings, they didn't really impress investors, Pete. And as funny as the Soup Nazi episodes were, this ain't funny for Campbell Soup.
No, it's not, John. But you know what? I think it's a bit of an overreaction today. As a matter of fact, I think this thing's gotten way too cheap. Their problem was they did raise prices. The problem was they didn't raise them enough. So they missed on their earnings by, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of 15% less than what they were expected or whatever. So I think because of that, people were a little bit fearful, but I like the guidance. I like what they were talking about going forward. And if they can get the pricing right, John, this thing already trades at a very reasonable PE. It's very inexpensive, actually. And there are times to own it, sometimes to not. I think right now is the time to take a look at this thing as it's getting punished to the downside, because they're getting punished for something that already happened. We're always looking into the future. And as we look into the future, if they can do a little bit better job with what they're doing on the pricing side of things, the margin suddenly becomes a big issue. So does the earnings. And I think that's something that they can turn around pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, Pete. I mean, it's down 17%, folks, year to date. That's a pretty big drop for a soup company. And like Pete said, though, it is a question of to hold market share, do you increase prices, or do you eat some of that input cost that went into providing people with your product, supplying them with your product? And in Campbell Soup's case, they're also spending a lot on CapEx, Pete. That's, they were expected, I think, spend like $330 million. They moved that up to 360. That extra 36 million apparently made the analysts nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit maybe about some of these big contracts in sports, Pete, because I know that you're a big Derek Carr fan, and I was too. Fresno State, the kid lit them up. I think he would have kept lighting them up if Oakland could have given him a few players, but they didn't, even when they moved out to Vegas. So what's your take on where he is now?
Well, I thought it'd be fun just to cover this up a little bit, John, because, now that we're basically through all of free agency, now we talked about yesterday, a couple of guys over the age of 30, they're still hanging around. They will get signed, Jadeveon Clowney and some of the other names that are big names, but they also want big money, and they're probably not going to get that big money. So there's still a few hanging around. Who's not hanging around, and he hasn't since pretty much day one, is Derek Carr, John. And the Raiders have made their decisions on the direction they want to go. Derek Carr has been a great quarterback for them for a very long time. All you've got to do is check out his numbers, and you can see, and you'd say to yourself, how did this team not win more games? I can tell you exactly how. They had one of the worst defenses in all of football since he's been the head quarterback with the Raiders, and it's really become a problem for the guy. Here's the good news for him. He got the biggest contract in free agency coming out, and I'm talking about somebody just moving on, right? And he got a 4-year, $150 million contract to go to the New Orleans Saints. By the way, he's going to be playing there with a former head coach from the Raiders back not too many years ago. So it's a marriage there. What were they lacking last year? It wasn't defense, John. They were top 5 in multiple categories. They were top 2 in a category or two. Their defense is there, and they still went out and got more defensive players. But when you look on the offensive side, you look at the running backs, you look at the receivers, and now you look in the fact, and a great offensive line, by the way, but now you've got somebody who can actually throw the football. This could be a really dangerous team as we're looking at the NFL season this year. Nobody's talking about them. I mean, nobody. I mean, everything is about the AFC for the most part. outside of a couple of teams, maybe. But this is a team nobody's talking about. And I'm telling you right now, John, I think with Derek Carr, that maybe pushes them up 4 or 5 more wins. Suddenly, this is a team that's got double-digit wins, and they have a great opportunity with that defense. What are you thinking? Is there somebody else I'm missing as far as like a huge impact from this? Just one guy?
No, I don't think you are missing it, Pete. And you and I always loved that Jadeveon Clowney, but
Yep.
I just don't know if time has passed him by. I mean, he's not a young guy anymore. So he's going to have to show people that he really has it still, that fire to get a big contract. And if not, he'll get a 3-year contract with the first 2, the biggest parts of it, and the third more or less an option probably. But I think that guy is a heck of a player. I think, DeAndre Hopkins, is it DeAndre Hopkins, Pete?
Yep.
That's out there, but when you look at the biggest deals signed, like you said, Derek Carr, $100 million guaranteed, Lamar Jackson, that new deal is going to be pretty special to keep an eye on. Yeah. I think Jimmy G, with the guarantees that we talked about there too, for a guy that gets banged around a lot, it just shows you that the new group of owners in the NFL aren't like the old group of owners that held all the money like this. Yeah. This new group is willing to spend. And that's why the TV contracts just keep going up, because they got talent and it gets spread around. It's not like, other than Aaron Rodgers, next to nobody stays at the team they were drafted by and stays there their whole career. Just does not happen. J.J. Watt goes from Houston over to Arizona and so forth. One of the breakout players defensively in at least a decade. So I don't think people stick around as long at the individual spot, but that isn't bad. It's bad for the fans in that city that he left, but it's not bad for the league. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, Pete. And that's why I think football, they used to call baseball America's pastime. That's a joke. It is not. It is not. It's where you can go to get a tan. That's what baseball is.
And to all my haters out there who are mad at me about the NBA, they don't really care until you get to the playoffs, guys. Now, nobody watched until you get to the playoffs. Then we all watch. As a matter of fact, why don't we jump to the NBA, NHL? Sure. So, John, we're going back to Miami. And why is that? Because you and I have been all over this. We got 2 8 seeds that are still in it, into the finals. One of them split. That was the Heat. Real briefly, I'll touch on the game for tomorrow night, which is the hockey side of things. I think that Bobrovsky has not done what he had been doing in the playoffs so far as a goalie. He's given up way too many. He's given up 8 goals himself, John. They've also, his backup gave up a couple of goals as well. But I'll tell you what, this kid, Aiden Hill, has been absolutely outrageous in the nets for the Knights. And you and I have been there. I think we went together, but I've been there to games in that stadium in Las Vegas. And I can tell you, 18,500 people make a hell of a lot of noise, and that is a huge advantage. So maybe that swing to Miami gives these guys a shot, maybe to come out of it. They're down 0-2. But how about the Heat? You and I have been talking about it. We talked about Jimmy Butler. We've talked about all of the things that they have done. They've got guys that weren't even drafted that are on the team that are outstanding and doing their job. It's amazing to me because I actually watched the entire game the other night, and I usually don't. I'll come in later because the second half's the most interesting. But the first half, Miami was in a bit of an interesting move. They started off good. Then they kind of looked like they were giving it up. Next thing you know, you push towards the fourth quarter. Who is the fourth quarter? Those are the guys that are the ballers, John. Those are the guys who step up when the pressure's on. Well, Miami outscored them. They absolutely destroyed them from that perspective. I think it was 36-25 in the fourth quarter. But it was who did it. And it's the guys that nobody knows. Gabe Vincent and Robinson and Struss and all of these other guys, right? And obviously Bam, the big center, did a great job. He was phenomenal. I think Jimmy Buckets actually stepped up pretty good as well, John, but didn't have his best game, that's for sure. But it's amazing to watch how these guys actually got there, held on, and I mean held on, but they split in Denver. And I'll tell you, everybody talks about it. You've got a daughter out there. There is a big deal about, when you're playing in elevation, there is something that is a factor there. Well, they ain't in elevation now. They're down in Miami at water level, sea level, as they call it. And that's going to be a really, really fun game tonight. Who do you got? Do you think Miami can do it 2 in a row?
Yep, I sure do. That would be where my money is, Pete. I think overall, you look at Jimmy and Jimmy Butler, of course, Jimmy Buckets, as you call him. I think that the fact that he scored 28 points in the last game that he had against the Celtics, and he had 7 rebounds. The first game that they lost in the finals, he only scored like 13 points. So they basically had to figure out, okay, look, Jimmy's going to draw the people to him, and then he's going to have to feed. He's going to have to pass because he's drawing the coverage and gives other people a better shot. And I believe, Pete, that is what played out in game 2. And I think what they should follow the same exact game plan for game 3 because he scored 21, still less than, he'd been averaging in playoff basketball, but and his rebounds went down, but he was basically just on the court for literally 38 or 39 minutes, Pete, and pulling people over to him and letting those other guys do their thing. And they're able to fill up the hoop. So as long as that happens, I think he's satisfied scoring 20. But if he goes off, which he could in Miami, Pete, especially coming back, like you say, with that extra hemoglobin from being up there at altitude, who knows? He could go on a 40-point run. He does that and they blow him out in Miami.
Yeah, it could be pretty exciting. It just shows you how unselfish he is because he talked about it too, John. He talked about in those press conferences, hey, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. If the guy's open, I'm going to get the ball to him. That's the way it's going to be. He's not going to force it himself. And that's being unselfish. That's not being scared because he's not scared. Jimmy Butler's not a guy who's scared. The other thing is on the defensive side, John, they absolutely clamped down on Denver. Denver only was 39% shooting from 3-point, where on the other side, it was dang near 49% shooting from 3-point for the Heat. If that stays that way and that defense stays that way, I'm with you. Miami's got them tonight. It's going to be fun to watch.
It will be. Well, you have been listening to The Rebel's Edge and watching The Rebel's Edge. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you share this little broadcast with your friends. And remember, this is on Spotify. It's on Twitter. We put it up on Facebook. We're on thestreet.com. If you go to thestreet.com and you type that, just click that box that says investing or options, you'll see the Rebel's Edge, folks. So join the firm. It's a fun ride. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern.